Last week, I talked about the cities where the cost of housing and transportation alone are most likely to flat out bankrupt you. Well, this week I'm doing the opposite. I'm talking about the cities where the median household has the most left over to save, or do whatever they want with, after paying for housing and transportation. I'll briefly talk about how I analyzed it, and then we'll count down the 10 cities where the median household lives in the most location-efficient manner, and it's coming up next. This is CityNerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer-suggested topics always welcome, and this is a continuation from last week's suggestion, but don't get comfortable with the idea that I'm ever going to make two videos out of the same idea again. It is worth talking a little more about why we consider housing and transportation together in this kind of analysis, because this isn't just an academic question. There are real trade-offs people make every day about whether they should rent, say, a $1,200 apartment in the suburbs or an $1,800 apartment in the city. Some of it comes down to lifestyle preference, but a lot of it is because there's a very real delta between what your transportation expenses are going to be in a car-dependent suburb compared to living in an urban neighborhood with rail transit or even frequent bus lines. And today is really all about understanding that delta and what we consider when we're making location decisions. I'm not going to go through the technical aspects of how I measured median rent, median transportation expense, and median household income for all the cities I looked at. But if you haven't seen last week's video, which is really part one of this two-part series, you should go watch it and then come right back here. I'll wait. Note that I use the word median here a lot. If you don't understand what that word means, allow me to recommend this website, because this past week I got a lot of comments along the lines of, I can find lots of apartments in New York that are $2,000 or $3,000 a month. Yes, the word median does mean that literally half the units are going to be at or below the median price. It also means the opposite is true. Cliff Notes version for those of you who watched part one. This is US cities over 200,000 population that anchor a metro area over 1 million, just because that's what I felt like doing. It's the median apartment that was on the market in October 2023 in each city. And thanks again to Dwellsy for the extensive and timely data. For transportation, remember that I estimated the car ownership of the median household and multiplied that by AAA's cost of car ownership. A couple notes on this that I glossed over last time. The AAA number is for a newer vehicle. Also, for households with more than one vehicle, the costs may be slightly lower on the second car, since it may get used less and be cheaper to insure than the first vehicle. Those are maybes though, and remember that I'm probably underestimating vehicle ownership, since I calculated all the households in the 3+ category as having exactly 3 vehicles. 10-car households, don't think I don't see you. Okay, and I have to talk more about median household income, because when I originally came up with the idea for this analysis, it was just going to be housing and transportation costs alone, and not as a percentage of some hypothetical income. But as I got into it, it seemed unfair to compare expensive coastal cities with contracting Rust Belt cities when the local economies and prevailing wages are so radically different. So I decided to do housing plus transportation as a proportion of a city's median household income. But this comes with its own problems. You can argue that housing prices are high because incomes are high, or you can make the argument in the other direction, and I can just plot all the cities I looked at and you can see a pretty solid trend. But what you're going to find on this list is that the difference in economic conditions and median incomes probably has a lot more effect on these rankings than housing or transportation costs do, which raises all sorts of interesting and maddening new questions. Just hang on, you'll see. So it is a weird list, but these are the cities where the median household is spending the least proportion of its income on housing and transportation, with a decent amount of money left over. Okay, assuming I've got you appropriately prepared to be annoyed, let's get into it. Number 10, Oakland, California, which I am considering a co-central city with San Francisco. The median rent was only $22.50 a month, and I feel weird saying only, but this is the Bay Area. You've got access to all of the economic opportunities in the 2 metro areas I looked at that have the highest GDP per capita in the US, really good transit access, good urban fabric. I'm not going to tell you it's affordable for every possible person who wants to live there, but the median household still has roughly half their income left over after housing and transportation. Number 9, Denver. Above average incomes, median rent is in the 1800s. Car ownership is getting up close to 2 per household, but there's definitely potential to live car-free or car-light here. A theme on this list, besides high median incomes, is going to be that these are mostly cities that either have good urbanism for the US or are trending in a good direction. But note that Denver and Oakland, even being in the top 10, are still cities where the median household appears to be spending over 50% of its income on housing and transportation. Number 8, Portland, Oregon, a city I visited a couple months ago and I will be back soon. A hollowed out, smoking crater of a city when you see it on right-wing news television. And there are definitely parts of the central city that are a little dispiriting post-pandemic, but it always has been a city of great neighborhoods. Median household income over $80,000, median rental property in the 1500s, pretty good transportation options if you want to economize on driving, and a pretty good number of Portlanders do exactly that. Number 7, Minneapolis, another city I've visited this year. Median household income right at the US average of $74,000, $75,000. But median rent in October this year was $12.95 to live in a city that has pretty good transit, very good biking for the US, and a phenomenal park system. It's just kind of a crazy good value in my opinion. Just as a point of reference, the typical US household owns more than 2 vehicles, and every city on this list, save for one, has car ownership rates below that and often well below. And that includes, shockingly, the number 6 city, Austin, Texas, which in the history of this channel, I do not believe I've managed to get on any kind of top 10 list that any city would want to be on. But young, educated people flock here, and the median household income is almost $90,000, which is very high for a central city in Texas. Median rent is in the 1700s, and I don't want to say that Austin is a bastion of walkability and great transit, but you can definitely find your spots, and vehicle ownership actually lower than Denver. Okay, let's get a bit of a wild card in here. Number 5, Atlanta. Not a coastal city and not quite the hub for high-income tech jobs a city like Austin is, but the local economy is pretty strong, and the hypothetical average person does all right on housing and transportation here. Median household income above $80,000 a year, median rental under $1,600, and the typical household is down close to 1.5 cars, well below the national average. Really interesting city that honestly warrants a lot more attention on this channel. Number 4, now we're going to get to the part of the list that's just going to irritate everyone. It's San Jose, California. So look, you can interpret this list however you want. The numbers are the numbers, but I probably wouldn't interpret it as the most affordable cities in the US. What San Jose is a core US city with a very high median household income, over $130,000, and that's going to buy you a lot of housing and transportation, even at San Jose prices. Yeah, the median rental is almost $3,000 a month, but just keep in mind that's lower than Miami, and the median income is over twice as high. So high, in fact, that you can afford 2.12 cars, apparently. Okay, so that was annoying, but I regret to tell you it's about to get a lot worse when we get into the top 3. Also, I've got some, well, I don't know if honorable is the right word for it, but I've got some mentions for you. If nothing else, just to satisfy your curiosity about some cities you might not have seen mentioned yet. But first, brief reminder to click on the various screen elements. I think the notification bell will let you know when I post on the community tab, which I do when I'm planning on doing things like live streams, giving you schedule updates, earth-shattering news, whatever. Stay in touch on the apps, and Patreon is, as always, a great way to support continued production of whatever it is I do on here. Okay, let's hit some mentions. Again, I limited this to central cities over 200K because the sample size and representativeness of rental properties in a lot of suburbs seemed too questionable when I looked at it, but I just want to talk about the Metroplex real quick. When I put together my master list of cities over 200K, I was not prepared for how many of them exist in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Literally more than any other metropolitan statistical area in the US, and it's not even really close. And they're all very car oriented, but the median household incomes in some of these are so high and the rent's so relatively reasonable that they still pencil out really well. I mean, for the people who actually want to live in places like this. And let's talk about a couple cities that I know people are going to wonder about just because I just know you guys. Houston, which has a reputation for non-existent zoning and cheap housing, not actually that cheap and below average median incomes. Boston, good walkability and transit, relatively low car ownership, but the median rental is ridiculous and Boston just doesn't have the Bay Area type economy that would justify it. Philly, which I always think of as having basically all the urban amenities of Boston at half the price. And the median rent is literally half as much, but the median incomes are more like a Rust Belt city than a Northeast Corridor city, which still makes it a great value if you're coming from one of the other big East Coast cities, just not for the median resident. And the Philadelphia of the Midwest, actually fairly close to making this list. Median rent right at $1,800 a month and 1.4 cars per household, which is very low for the US, but incomes being a bit lower than the national median keeps Chicago off this list. Okay, let's get back to it. Number 3 is Washington, D.C. Vehicle ownership, not quite as low as New York, but it is the second lowest out of all the cities I looked at. The other parts of the equation, though, are radically different. The median income is over $100,000 and the median rent is under $2,500. When you put it all together, housing and transportation are only taking about 42% of your income if you're the median household, and probably a lot less if you can get by car free, which doesn't at all seem unreasonable for DC. Number 2, let's go to a comment I received on last week's video. Viewer says I've very much influenced their thinking, which is probably regrettable. Says my methodology is suspect, which I think is probably an accurate and evergreen comment, and that as a resident of the Bay Area, they think there's a very good argument for paying more for housing in order to have access to that region's incredible economic opportunities. You can pause and read the comment at your leisure, and I don't want to imply that I agree with all of it, and you might be surprised that I even read it at all since I read so few comments. But the viewer did flip me $100, so I didn't really have a choice, did I? So yes, number 2 is San Francisco, believe it or not. But think of it as San Jose with slightly higher rents, slightly higher median incomes, and vastly, vastly superior walkability, bikeability, and transit. Number 1, a lot of people are not going to want to hear this, but it is Seattle, Washington. Look, the reality is there's probably no other city where the economy has been so thoroughly transformed by tech. It used to be the city went into a depression if like Boeing lost out on a contract to McDonnell Douglas or Airbus, and now the city is basically unrecognizable from what it was just a couple decades ago. I'm not saying that's good or bad. If you make the median income, or higher obviously, well then, according to the data I have, you're sitting pretty. Median household income around $115K, median rental under $2,000, really? And households are right around 1.5 vehicles. That comes out to less than a third of the median income on housing and transportation, easily the lowest on this list. A couple additional thoughts. 1, people who are already doing pretty well financially are accumulating even more wealth in these cities by spending less on car ownership. But isn't that a benefit that should exist for more than just the people who can afford the housing that exists in these cities, which is still far too scarce? Given our climate goals, we should all be able to economize on car ownership or get rid of it altogether. Also, remember this analysis was based on rental prices. There's a more complicated way I could have done this with buying a house or condo, and I could have made some assumptions about mortgages and down payments. But the current consensus seems to be that this is actually a pretty good time to be renting, and that's where I'm at, so that's what I did. And please remember, I've been talking about medians through all of these 2 videos, but the reality is the median household is a completely hypothetical thing. Different people have different values and are looking to get different things out of life. Humans aren't a monolith, and some of us are better or worse at recognizing good value, and our skill in negotiating a good price varies a lot too. It really raises the question, when you make a big purchase, a place to live, or a car, how do you make sure you're making the right choice? You could rely on the rock-solid information you get from car ads on TV, or the copy you read in for sale listings written by real estate agents. But if you're like me, you're all about the data and you want to find an independent resource that's rigorous and trustworthy. GiveWell provides that independent resource for a very different kind of purchase, a charitable donation. GiveWell is a nonprofit that spent over 15 years researching charitable organizations, and they only direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found. They're dedicated to creating the opportunity for as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high impact giving. They make all their research and recommendations accessible on their site at no cost, and you can make tax-deductible donations to the recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell doesn't take a cut. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate over $1 billion, and rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 150,000 lives and will improve the lives of millions more people. So you can imagine why GiveWell's approach is appealing for someone like me, because unfortunately, I am a maximizer. That means I find it hard to be decisive unless I know for sure that I'm choosing the optimal thing. And I bet a lot of you are like this too, even when you know that sometimes not making a decision is the worst decision of all. Like for me, when I have made recommendations to donate to nonprofits on this channel, they're things related to urbanism and transportation that I actually know something about. But when it comes to things that literally save hundreds of thousands of lives, like malaria treatment, I'm kind of hopeless, which means I might not do anything at all. GiveWell solves that problem. So if you've never donated to GiveWell's recommended charities before, you can have your donation matched up to $100 up until the end of the year, or as long as matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org and at checkout, select YouTube and enter CityNerd. GiveWell is extremely data-driven, so they want to know how people heard about what they do, and you want to get your donation matched. Everyone wins, so make sure to let them know this channel sent you. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or to find out more. And that's all I got. Thanks for joining, and thanks as always to the patrons who really help keep this channel rolling along. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.